Hello, everyone. Welcome to Slash Film Daily. Today is Tuesday, December 17th, 2024. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be talking about the latest film and TV news. My name is Ben Pearson. I am an editor at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
All right, Brad, before we get started, Brian and I talked on yesterday's show about Warner Brothers confirming that War of the Rohirrim was made to retain the rights to the Lord of the Rings franchise, and we were basing that conversation on a quote that seemed to come directly from the studio. We talked about how rare it is that a studio would actually come out and say that, blah, blah, blah. But evidently, that quote may not have actually come from WB, and it may have been instead like some outlets rephrasing reporting that was in Variety or Hollywood Reporter about the situation. So
Son of a
anyway,
bitch.
what happened?
I'm just mad that this is what happened.
Yeah. It's extremely upsetting stuff, Brad. Very, very serious. Anyway, I mean, basically, I just wanted to clarify that, like, I can't be sure that this quote came directly from somebody at the studio, and I wanted to clear that up. The underlying facts are true. The studio did actually make this movie just to retain the rights to the Lord of the Rings franchise. So anyway, just wanted to clear that up in case there was any confusion. Let's dive into some actual real news here. And this is another thing that Ryan and I sort of alluded to briefly on yesterday's episode, which was that Mike Flanagan, the horror director, is going to be joining James Gunn's new DC universe with a Clayface movie. He's going to be writing the script for a Clayface film. I was wondering how you reacted when you saw this, Brad, because I don't know if you remember, but like a few years ago, I think it was 2021, Mike Flanagan was out there talking about how he had a take on Clayface, and that obviously nothing really happened with that. But now he's like officially writing this movie, and James Gunn has announced the project. So what do you make of this?
Right now, I'm just filled with so much curiosity about what is going to unfold from James Gunn's DC universe. I'm not sure I'd call it excitement yet. That might change, once we get that Superman trailer this week. But like, I just don't really know what to expect because like it feels like they're biting off so much with that Superman movie by having so many characters in it, and I like that they're bringing in interesting filmmakers to do stuff with characters that haven't really gotten the spotlight like this on the big screen before. So that's really intriguing, especially someone like Flanagan taking on a character like Clayface. But I don't know what to expect from a movie that is just about Clayface, because like villains like this so often only work when they are just like a part of a movie that is focused on the superhero and they're the antagonist. So I'm not really sure. I trust Mike Flanagan implicitly, and I think there's probably something interesting to be done here, but yeah, I don't know if I can get excited about this one yet.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Have you seen any of the Harley Quinn animated show? Have we talked about that?
I watched the first season and I really liked it. I just haven't caught up with the rest of it yet.
Yeah, I'm at least a season behind, but I think it's so funny, and I want to say it's Alan Tudyk who does the voice of Clayface on that. Yeah,
it would be great
so
if he plays Clayface. That would be a lot of fun. I can't imagine they would do that because there's not going to be the crossover between Harley Quinn and live action like there is with some of the other stuff that James Gunn is working on as far as animation and live action. But yeah, I mean, it would be a lot of fun to see him do that.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of Creature Commandos yet, but evidently Alan Tudyk is voicing Clayface in that too, which is interesting. I wonder what that's like.
I think then maybe it's possible.
Well, I think a lot of that is on. I want to say that show is streaming on Max right now, and I'm not sure like how far into the season they are. But I can't imagine the iteration of Clayface is the same one from Harley Quinn. Like he must be putting a different spin on it. So yeah, then like would he put yet a third spin on it in a live action kind of thing? I don't know. And evidently there's also some confusion about like whether or not this will actually cross over into Matt Reeves's I think they're calling it the Batman Epic Crime Saga, which is sort of the umbrella of like the universe that Matt Reeves has created, where the Penguin falls under that, for example, and they're working on the Batman 2. And apparently Clayface is a big addition to Matt Reeves' The Batman 2, according to Deadline. And Matt Reeves is going to be, I think, executive producing this Clayface movie. So that sort of throws a whole different wrinkle into this conversation. So just a lot to sort of sort through here. And like you, I'm very curious to see what they do with that. So we'll be definitely keeping our eyes on this because they're looking for a director for this project. Like I said, Flanagan's just writing it. So I'm sure we'll talk about it more when they figure out a director for that. I also wanted to mention that the next Evil Dead movie has a title, and that title is Evil Dead Burn. which is a pretty sick title. And
Pretty
the only
sick
thing we
burn. Hey.
the only thing we the only thing we really know about it at this point is that it's coming out in 2026. So, did you see Evil Dead Rise? What did you think about that one?
I did. I dug it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I don't always get into the gore fest like that, but with Evil Dead movies, it's usually pretty fun. Lots of twisted violence and stuff like that. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so Sebastian Vanacek, who directed a little movie called Infested, is the filmmaker behind this one, and I think he co-wrote the script with the same co-writer that he worked on Infested with, and that's Florent Bernard is the name of that person. So, yeah, definitely like a wait and see kind of situation, but Evil Dead Burn, pretty cool title. All right, so before we take a break, I wanted to touch on two trailers that came out recently. Actually, let's talk about 28 Years Later first. That came out, I guess it was last week at this point. Danny Boyle and Alex Garland are reuniting for this movie. We've known about this for a little while, but the first trailer came out for it, and I thought this was a great trailer. It's very unusual considering the type of trailers that we normally get. This one seems like I guess it is like the first trailer, so it's kind of a teaser and it doesn't really give a ton away. But like in terms of creating an atmosphere and dropping us into that world, I thought it did a great job. But what did you think about this trailer?
Yeah, it's extremely creepy and unsettling. It's a little odd that the movie looks so good, knowing what they went for with the original 28 Days Later. Seeing it in the world like that in HD. I wonder if there will be some kind of like evolution of like the visuals or something like that, or if that's just what they're going to go with from the get go, just because it is contemporary times. They don't have to be cheap about it anymore. But no, this looks really cool. I think my biggest concern about this movie is like we've had so much zombie and undead stuff in the time since 28 Days Later came out. I just wonder how this is going to stand out from stuff like The Walking Dead, The Last of Us, all that stuff that has become huge in pop culture. And so I hope Danny Boyle has something else interesting here up his sleeve.
Yeah, the fact that Alex Garland is writing this, I think gives me a little bit of confidence that
Yeah,
they'll make it more interesting than just your typical zombie genre fare kind of stuff. And like I guess the consistent through line for a lot of zombie fiction is sort of like, yes, the zombies are the ostensible threat, but like humanity and what we do to each other and what the survivors do, like that's the real sort of
we're the
horror of.
real zombies.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like Alex Garland is, he's like a really misanthropic guy, it seems like, and he is able to craft pretty dark takes on the world and humanity and society and stuff like that. So I think I want to say this movie might be like the zombies are kind of an afterthought almost based on what I know of Garland's work. But yeah, we'll see how this goes. What are your feelings on the first two movies in this trilogy? Because I actually have not seen either one yet.
You haven't seen 28 Days Later?
I haven't. I missed it when it first
Wow.
came out, and then it's just been incredibly difficult to find on
Yeah.
streaming and stuff like that. And I think we wrote something yesterday that, like, as of this week, that first movie is gonna be available to rent digitally for like the first time in like a decade, maybe. I don't know how long, but
Yeah.
a long time. So,
Um
yeah. What do you think of those two?
so when I was watching this trailer, I was thinking to myself, I don't know if I saw 28 Weeks Later. So I might need to go and refresh myself on that, because if I did see it, I don't remember a damn thing about it. But I do remember 28 Days Later very much so. And yeah, it was such a fascinating watch, just like, not because it was a good, scary zombie kind of movie, but because it was shot, so cheaply on, basically like digital video, back when digital video still didn't look very great. But they were able to do some really impressive things with like real locations in London that made London look completely abandoned, where they didn't have
Hmm.
to employ a lot of visual effects. Like, it was just about good timing and keeping certain places closed down. And it's really eerie to see Killian Murphy walking around, next to Big Ben and, certain London landmarks where it's totally abandoned. And it looks legit real because they didn't have to use visual effects to do it. They just actually did it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think 28 Days Later still holds up. I'm interested to see what you think after you watch it here sometime soon. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see what happens.
Cool. Yeah, I also want to give a shout out to Aaron Taylor Johnson, who appears in this movie. He's wielding a bow and arrow and looks pretty cool. I mean, I think he's catching a lot of flack for Kraven the Hunter right now, but I think he's going to be able to pull out of that nosedive pretty quickly. He's got Nosferatu coming up in what, a week or something like that, and then he's got 28 years later on tap. So yeah, I'm curious to see sort of what the trajectory of his career looks like over the next few years. There have been rumors for months and months and months that he's going to be the next James Bond. So who knows how all of that will shake out. But yeah, anyway. All right. The other trailer is for Karate Kid Legends, which has been teased for a while. I think was supposed to come out maybe this year and then has been bumped to next year. And this is a movie that ostensibly ties together a lot of the Karate Kid mythos into one film. So Ralph Macchio's Daniel LaRusso is like a major character here. Jackie Chan's Mr. Han from the 2010 Karate Kid reboot is in this. So it brings together these sort of two universes. And then I guess there might be some connections to the Cobra Kai show. I'm not sure how serious those connections are going to be, but this takes place after the events of the final season of Cobra Kai, which I think is still upcoming on Netflix. So I assume you watched this trailer, Brad. What did you think about it?
Yeah, it looks somewhat intriguing, I guess. I don't know, really how they're going to bring these two worlds together. I haven't been keeping up with Cobra Kai, so I don't know how much, of that series is supposed to influence where the movie is and the story. I think the martial arts stuff looks interesting enough, but I just don't know if, like, after Cobra Kai, if we need another Karate Kid thing like this I'm not sure if anybody was like, oh man, we really got to get Jackie Chan and Ralph Macchio together. And like, I remember being intrigued by the concept when they first announced it, and simply because it's always great to see Jackie Chan doing stuff, but like Cobra Kai has gone on for, longer now. It's about to end. And I just, I'm sure it's a strike while the iron is hot situation where like, oh, let's get Kai fans into theaters and see, bringing several Karate Kid universes together and that kind of thing. But I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I was wondering because I have not watched any of Cobra Kai either, and I was wondering if the latent nostalgia, I guess, from the early Karate Kid movies would be enough to get you to see this. Let's pretend you didn't have to see it for work or something. Like, is there enough interest there where maybe you could sort of dip back into this universe and see what happens here without actually going through the homework process of watching all of Cobra Kai? Like, would this trailer interest you enough to do that if we weren't having to pay closer attention to this stuff?
Yeah, I think if I knew that Cobra Kai wasn't an integral part of what's going to happen in this movie, then I would probably be a little more curious. But even
that's my understanding. I think. I mean,
yeah.
Rafael Montemayor, who writes for us at Slash Film, he is like a big Cobra Kai guy, and I think he said something along those lines in our Slack today that it's not going to be like a huge Cobra Kai narrative tie-in or anything like that. So
yeah. So if that is the case, I mean, I'm curious enough that I would probably go see it just because I do love the original, Karate Kid movies. So yeah, I guess, sure.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, let's take a break and we'll come back. We have some more news items to talk about. All right, so Austin Butler is going to be playing Patrick Bateman in Luca Guadagnino's new version of American Psycho. We talked about this project not too long ago. He seems like a very unconventional pick for somebody to direct a new American Psycho movie. But what do you think about Austin Butler in the role that sort of really, I guess, took Christian Bale's career to new heights?
I think it's kind of perfect. Austin Butler feels like he has the right persona, both like publicly as an actor and as a performer, to pull this off, because he really, immerses himself in the characters he plays. He gets pretty intense about it. And he just has that kind of look where you can easily see him being Patrick Bateman, and I'm sure his fan base is just going to be like go crazy once they see what he does with a role like this.
I was wondering if you think that Austin Butler has what it takes comedically to. I guess it's hard because I'm not sure exactly what the take on this movie is going to be, because Christian Bale's version of Patrick Bateman is, of course, like a psychopath or whatever, but he's also really funny in the way that he delivers a lot of these lines. And it's been a long time, maybe a couple decades or something, since I've seen American Psycho, but I just remember being so taken aback by that performance and the sort of the comedy mixed with like the just really dark shit that character gets into.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you think Austin Butler has what it takes on the comedic side, because a lot of the work that we've seen him in, Dune, The Bike Riders, what have you, Elvis, even, this stuff is not like a laugh a minute. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I hope so. I think that he's probably one of those actors where the comedy will probably come from him playing it straight, and just the comedy that comes from how, I guess, like, absurd that character is if it's approached in a satirical way.
Mhm.
Because like that's one of the best things about Adam Driver, when he does comedy, especially on Saturday Night Live. He's not trying to be funny. He just plays it like authentically, like a proper actor does, and the character is funny. So I think it depends on how the character is framed, what the style of the movie is. And let's not forget that Austin Butler was in Kevin Smith's A-list comedy Yoga Hosers. So I think that we have our answer.
I absolutely did forget that. And I think he also came from like the world of Disney Channel TV shows and stuff like that, or maybe like Nickelodeon TV shows. So I guess he has like some of that like play to the cheap seats comedy in like his early performing DNA. So I don't know. I don't even know if Luca Guadagnino is going to be interested in making the movie as funny as Mary Harron did the first time around. So yeah, just very curious to see what the tone of this movie is like, and what Austin Butler does with a pretty distinctive character. Okay, so speaking of great actors stepping into unconventional roles, Jeremy Allen White is going to be playing a somewhat forgotten Star Wars character in the new movie The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is coming from Jon Favreau. This is going to be the next Star Wars movie that hits theaters. It's coming in 2026. And yes, Jeremy Allen White, who plays Carmy on The Bear, he's in Iron Claw. He's going to be playing a character named Rada the Hutt, who evidently is the son of Jabba the Hutt. So, Brad, you're a Star Wars guy. What do you know about Rada the Hutt, and what do you think about Jeremy Allen White stepping into this role?
I don't know much about Rod of the Hutt. I know he appeared in animated Star Wars. I believe it was the Clone Wars series, and he gets saved, I think, by Anakin and Ahsoka, if I remember correctly. If you're among the Star Wars fans out there and that's wrong, I don't need to hear about it, because I don't I don't know for sure. But I think that's the case. But I know that we've only ever seen Rod of the Hutt as a baby in animated form, and no one really knows what happened to him after that. So it's relatively interesting on some level that like they're bringing a different Hutt into Star Wars canon through the Mandalorian and Grogu, and that they're having someone like Jeremy Allen White voice him, because Jabba the Hutt speaks in Huttese in Return of the Jedi, and also his special edition appearance in A New Hope. And it's not as if like they needed a famous voice actor to do that. So like, is Jeremy Allen White going to be speaking Huttese, or is he going to speak English like through a universal translator? And like, do we really need to have a Hutt that has the voice of Jeremy Allen White? I don't.
Yeah,
It just
uh,
seems weird, so weird to me.
it's bizarre. Like, just getting this guy to be in this world as a voice and not in a live action form, it just feels like such a weird collection of decisions that went into this, and it seems so strange for Jeremy Allen White as a performer to even be interested in this, unless he's just
Yeah,
like one of those guys who grew up like loving every single Star Wars thing that ever came out and just being obsessed with this universe and being like, find a place for me, I don't care, I'll gurgle and grunt my way into a machine and have you guys play with the pitch of it, and kind of like Ben Schwartz with BB-8 or something like that, like where he kind of contributed to the beeps and blorps or whatever of that
yeah.
character. But this feels bigger than that. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
and I guess it's one of those things too, where like maybe they have this role and like he can do it, but it still allows him to play a live action role sometime because he's just voicing one of the Hutts. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. It just seems weird that this is something that like is happening in the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, and it makes me worry like whether they really have anything here that's like worthy of the big screen, or if it's just going to feel like a truncated season of the Mandalorian that they happen to play in movie theaters.
Hmm. Yeah. I wonder, like, what the future of Star Wars is. If that movie tanks, like, what does that do to the brand overall? And, like, what does that do to the plans that they have to make other movies? And would that impact how Dave Filoni, who's like been elevated to a key creative position at Lucasfilm, would that impact how he goes about making decisions for what should be in what thing, and like how much to lean into previous stuff? Because he's been like obsessed with including, all of this lore that he sort of originated or like helped shepherd in the early days, into modern stuff, and like sort of adapting that stuff into live action and bringing those characters into live action that used to be in animation, stuff like that. So like, will a movie like that tanking be? Will he consider that to be like a repudiation of his own personal interests, and be like, all right, maybe Star Wars itself is bigger than the stuff that I helped introduce, and it needs to go in different directions? I mean, there's just like so many questions I have about what could happen here. So
Yeah.
we're at a really interesting point in the Star Wars timeline, I guess, the meta timeline of these projects being announced and greenlit and all that stuff. So obviously, we'll continue to talk about that. All right, so moving from Star Wars to Marvel, I wanted to mention Avengers: Doomsday. We know that this has Robert Downey Jr. coming back, and now Chris Evans is going to be coming back. So I was very down on the fact that Downey is returning to the MCU. I saw that largely as a pretty calculated and kind of cynical play by Marvel. But now that they're bringing Chris Evans back, and we don't know if he's going to be reprising his role as Steve Rogers, or if he's going to be playing a different character in some sort of alternate history kind of thing, or if he's going to be doing what Downey is doing and just playing a totally different character, just because, and like that's just what they're doing. But the fact that they're bringing him back makes me wonder if there's something bigger going on here that we don't know yet in terms of the approach to what this story is going to be, the scale of what the story is going to be. It's going to be massive because it's a big, big Avengers movie, and the return of Downey is going to get a lot of attention on this movie. But I wonder if this is going to be a thing where they get Scarlett Johansson to come back, and they get Chris Hemsworth, and like all of the major original Avengers to come back in some capacity and play with their personas in interesting ways or something. And if they do that, I think I'll be a little less annoyed than I was originally at just like, oh, they're bringing Downey back. What a cash grab. What a cheap kind of thing. So what's your take on all of this?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same position with the bringing Downey back as well. But at the same time, it always seemed like a no-brainer that they were going to end up bringing everybody back for Secret Wars. And the vibe that I'm getting now, as the details come out about Doomsday, is that it feels like Doomsday is going to be like Infinity War, and is probably going to lead into Secret Wars, and
Mm,
and Secret Wars is going to be like Endgame, because Secret Wars in the comics is a massive Marvel Comics event that brings together like all of like Marvel's superheroes basically. And so in this case, I feel like that they'll probably use it as an opportunity to bring together all the different Avengers they have, from what's supposed to be young Avengers to the original Avengers, maybe even alternate versions of Avengers similar to what they did in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, but maybe on a more satisfying, larger scale. So I have a feeling that this is probably like a big lead into what's going to happen with Secret Wars. I'm a little surprised that they are bringing Chris Evans in for Doomsday. I would have thought that they would have saved it for Secret Wars. So I'm curious as to like what the storyline is there. Like you said, is he an alternate Steve Rogers, or is it the Steve Rogers that we saw at the end of Endgame? I'm really curious about that and see how that plays out. But yeah, I mean, and honestly, it's one of those things too where like I feel like Chris Evans is by no means a bad actor, but I don't think he's really had any big breakout role after Avengers Endgame other than
mhm.
maybe Knives Out. And I wonder if he's like having trouble really finding something that is sticking for him, and giving him satisfaction as an actor, and that maybe going back to the well is just like, it's like, well, yeah, this will keep me going for a little while.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I hadn't really thought about the Secret Wars component, but I think that makes a ton of sense as well, because if you think about how many characters they're going to have to include in a story like that, and then you think about the potential of alternate versions of those characters, that's essentially double, the number of characters, right? If you have if you have an alternate for each person. And then if you just think about like the brass tacks of the amount of screen time that each person might get to tell a story like that, it makes a lot of sense to me that they would try to spread that larger story across these two movies, Doomsday and Secret Wars, in order. So I guess in for the end result to be that Secret Wars doesn't feel so crammed. Like maybe they can sort of like you said, use Doomsday as like a launch pad into Secret Wars in a way that feels as entertaining as Infinity War was leading up to Endgame. So I like that approach, that idea. One thing, the last thing we're going to talk about is something that I don't like quite as much, Brad, and that is the title for Wicked 2 was revealed. I think this was yesterday. It's going to be called Wicked: For Good. Comes out on November 21st, 2025. For Good is apparently one of the key songs in the second half of the musical, which this movie is going to be adapting. And I mean, you sort of expressed some fury early on about the Rohirrim situation, and I'm equally fired up about this, Brad, because we saw on screen that the text of the title of the first Wicked is Wicked: Part 1, and now we're expected to believe that we have to go from Wicked: Part 1 into Wicked: For Good. What kind of Fast and Furious nonsense is this, Brad? What's going on here?
This is fascist bullshit. I don't accept it, and I will never call Wicked: For Good by its title, even though I just did. No, actually, this is a very niche thing. Actually, the only thing I can think of when I see this title actually is in the episode of The Office where Michael goes to interview for a corporate job, and he acts like he has it, and he leaves like Dunder Mifflin Scranton, but he doesn't get the job, and he comes back into the office, and he goes, "I'm back," and he keeps repeating it, and then he goes, "I'm back for good." so I think I'm just gonna keep calling this Wicked: For Good.
Well, I would be very thrilled if you were able to keep up that bit for a full year every time you're on the podcast talking about that. But yeah, I'm guessing that's going to go right into the old memory hole as soon as we're done recording.
Nope.
Here.
Now that you've said that, I will actively make sure that if I ever have to talk about Wicked: For Good, I will say it just like that.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for today's show. You can find more about most of the stories that we talked about at slashfilm.com. I will link to a bunch of them in the show notes. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag topics to us at bpearson@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to take a minute to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really helps us out a lot. Tell your friends about the show any way you can. We'd really appreciate that. Thanks so much for listening.